You are listening to the 501 Companion Podcast. This is episode number 8, and 8 is a great number. The magic 8 ball, best predictor ever, not just because it's magic, but because it was filled with 8. Is 8 enough? 8 is never enough. And they talk about the 7 wonders of the world. Well, we are the 8th wonder of the world. Nick, cue the music. Guys, we are here. We are on the 8th episode. Things are happening. They are happening fast, and we have a lot to discuss tonight. But first, quick introductions. Matt, who are you?
Hey, everybody. I am Matt Balo, and I am your resident digital marketer.
Matt, do you have some fun 8s for us tonight?
Yeah, just when I was looking at 8s, it occurred to me, and I did a little research. 8 p.m. used to be known. Remember primetime TV, right? But now with streaming services and then with COVID being introduced, that's actually shifted. It's not like you have this primetime broadcast thing of 8 p.m. You now have 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., which I think is just absolutely fascinating.
I could not agree more, so I'm glad you brought that for our 8th episode. And Nick, who's our resident IT guy who puts the Intel inside of Intel. Nick, tell them who you are.
I'm Nick. I'm your resident geek, as you said. Nerd. Other monikers apply. My favorite 8. How about the V8, buddy? Car guy.
Nothing is like a V8. Race on Sunday, sell on Monday.
All right.
And the figure 8, I like that, Nick, right? You could do a figure 8 in your V8.
Yeah.
I was thinking like figure 8 was a wrestling move. Then I'm like, what is that? Like 2 figure 4s? Like, how does that work?
Both guys are doing figure 4s. They got a figure 8. My name is Buddy Scalera. I'm the host of the show and your resident content strategist. We got a jam-packed show for you tonight. It's going to go quick, so be ready to play this twice. First, we're going to lead off with news, and then we're going to get into a topic that we've been covering now for the past couple of episodes. But don't worry, we're going to onboard you and give you an opportunity to get caught up. But first, let's start with our news, guys. The strangest stock market story of the year just got stranger and strangely generous. I'm talking about the Reddit group WallStreetBest that cranked up GameStop and AMC, but mostly GameStop, to record highs in the stock market, flush with money from the stock market, and I would imagine cryptocurrency. These people went out and raised $200,000 for charity. Matt, tell them a little bit about the charity and what they did.
Well, this is a charity for gorillas. And so they were actually, they went out and, if anybody knows the history of WallStreetBets, it is a Reddit group. And it was a group of users who got together and decided to, let's say, put forth their own strategy in the stock market to no longer be subject to the conditions of large Wall Street traders and make their own pathway. But one of the interesting things is once they had this group assembled, they decided, hey, you know what else we can do with this? We can actually raise money for gorillas. And so that made its way around the Reddit group. And people went around adopting gorillas. And I thought it was an excellent article and a really interesting use of social media that we'll talk a little bit about why that is later.
And Nick, before I jump into this, I think the observation that I had was, thanks to a roaring stock market and a crazy valuation of cryptocurrency, there's a lot of money out there, right? There's just more money than people realize out there. And after they've made their money, paid off their houses, bought grandma a Ferrari, they still have lots of cash left over. What were your thoughts, Nick, when you were looking into this news story?
I thought it was interesting. And one of the things I wanted to do is look at 501c3, look up and try to find this charity and learn a little bit more about it. And I searched for the term gorilla, and we get no less than a couple of pages of organizations that are focused on gorilla rescue in particular, not just animal rescue. And the interesting thing is, this particular charity was one of the most, I'd call it successful in raising funds. So they've had, let's see, their last, the last year they reported income was 2019, $7 million they raised. So, you know, and I don't want to, I kind of feel in some ways, I get kind of a negative feeling about it, and I should. And all I'm thinking about is, you know, there's number 12 on the list, let's say, of guerrilla organizations. Why didn't they get the notoriety? And I'm not, you know, it just hit me that, you know, success goes to success, and really it takes into marketing. And maybe this is something that we could look at, you know, what can those other organizations do, or what haven't they done to,
Well, that's,
you know?
I'm with you, Nick. I mean, that's why we do what we do, right? I mean, because we're here to help the people who can't get who don't have a marketing team. And while, you know, reading that article, I don't think this was an intentional campaign for the charity. But what I do think is they were prepared for it, right? They had the right media. If you go to their website, they had elements that were shareable. They had the way to take in the donations. So when the opportunity did present, you know, they were actually able to take advantage of it, where in so many cases, whether it be the technology, we've seen servers crash, whether it be the financials, we've seen people go bankrupt due to success. You know, people are just not architected for this kind of impact, you know, like with the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, you know, they're just not architected to be able to take this on when they do get something that's successful. So you're right, Nick. It's really just interesting that, you know, it's not just the social media and viral nature of what happened. It's also their ability to be prepared for it and their ability to capitalize on it.
It's a good point. You know, Nick, I was glad you did that search, and it is interesting if people have a passion for animals. There's probably a charity for every animal you could imagine. And to go to what you had also said, guys, it looks like they gave their money to the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Oh.
I know. I felt like somebody was throwing a softball to me. I had to hit it. That's the level of humor we have. We do dad jokes here because
we do dad jokes.
We keep it
right?
we keep it dad level. Jokes. Somebody said, I would like to hear a good dad joke. And I was like, there are no good dad jokes.
There are none.
There's just corny dad jokes. But anyway, guys, I think what's really, to me, was exciting was, you know, this idea that right now, most of these charities, and maybe we could look into this in the future, are still taking donations a classic way. And you have to wonder, can these charities be gifted stock? Can they be gifted Bitcoin or Ethereum? Yes. I'm looking into this new cryptocurrency website called rally.io. Just one of these things that popped up on my radar as I'm researching crypto. I'm very interested in that topic. And I look at those, I think maybe in the future, we should think about, like, how can charities be creative about receiving gifts, both, you know, as anonymously as people want. Maybe people just want to donate anonymously. And that's the promise of Bitcoin and Ethereum, right?
Or securely, understand, you know, part of you know, Bitcoin and the architecture behind it is, you know, it's called the trust protocol, you know, to ensure, man, what's more trustworthy than donating to a charity?
So, you know, we look at these news stories with an eye toward helping to share ideas that we see that are happening in the marketplace. And we do hope that our listeners send us stories that they think we might be interested in. So I think, you know, we're out there on the platforms. We'll talk about where you can find us, but ultimately we are in service of people who are passionate about charities. And what greater way to bring that passion than with our topic of the week? And I would like to just note that this topic of the week is not just educational for you. We learn something each episode from Matt, our chief marketing guru. No, let's not say guru, because guru is such a trendo sort of word. Just our marketing guy.
Gorilla.
Our marketing gorilla.
Razorback.
Matt Balo. Matt, tell us about the topic of the week, and also maybe just a quick recap of where we are so far in this learning journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last couple of weeks we've been evolving. We've started with our vision and mission, and it was kind of slow. And we're like, hey, I want to get into the cool stuff, into the campaigns and the tactics. But we've evolved, right? We started with our vision mission. We went into like defining strategy. We went into target markets. We started to talk about journeys and messages last week. And we just barely started to touch on the topic that I want to discuss today. And this is actual behavior change. Okay, because at the end of the day, when we're marketing, one of the major things we're looking to do is change some form of behavior. As you mentioned, buddy, that behavior may be shifting people over to cryptocurrency, right? Or being able to donate or take on cryptocurrency, or to adjust or impact the stock market, right? So there's lots of different behaviors at play, but at the end of the day, we're looking to impact those behaviors in a certain way, and that's what we're going to discuss today.
I love that. I've always thought that marketers will sometimes take the easy way out by just saying, we're here to educate the market. At the end of that campaign, however, you need to get somebody to change their behavior, and that might be, increase donations. It might be tell a friend about donations. So there's a lot of different traditional marketing concepts that I think you're going to be touching on.
Yep.
So I won't take the wind out of your sails. Because I love your team lessons. Yeah, Nick and I learned something. Mostly Nick. I would think more Nick than me. I mean,
no doubt.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a couple of things that you noted there, buddy, was we are at the end of the day looking to change behavior, and what's led us to this point is defining what is the behavior we want to change. And we're going to take a little bit. We're going to shift gears now. We're going to start to talk about how do we now change that behavior? Okay, so I'm going to start by defining behavior change for you, as I tend to do when we start a new topic, right? And it's defined as information or systems or form or other information that reinforce an attitude, a behavior, or acts of compliance without using deception or coercion. And I think that last part is really key too, right? Because you want to, as you said, educate, you want to inform, you want to align, right? You want to increase awareness, and all these things are what help people change behavior. And now there's actually a lot of different ways to do that. Okay, makes sense? Okay, here we go. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. So I'm going to start with talking about how people think. Okay, so Daniel Kahneman, an economist, very famous. Anything you read on marketing or technology is probably a derivation of one small part of the work that Kahneman did. Okay, and so Kahneman wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And Thinking Fast and Slow, in its simplest form, right, is this two-system thinking, fast and slow, where the brain divides up labor. Okay, system one, fast, is efficient. Boom, 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 boom. It makes very quick comparisons and super quick judgments, okay? So you can make choices. System two is slower, more automatic. It's things that you're not aware of. Maybe think like subconscious, okay? And as a marketer, the reason this is important is because you want to start to understand how are you interacting, okay? You're walking through the aisle and you're about to check out. What's on the shelf next to you? Candy, right? Because this is, boom, I want candy. Right? So you think about how these things how people think can start to be applied. Some people call this the elephant and the rider, right? The rider can't always turn that elephant the way they want him to go. The elephant's in charge, but the rider's got to coerce him into the direction you're trying to go. Think behavior changes the elephant, right? Make sense? Mm-hmm. And now to get there, how many, if you had to guess, and maybe I don't know if you looked at the notes, how many ways, studied, scientific, psychological ways, are there to change behavior? Now they're called behavior change techniques.
I didn't even cheat and look at the notes. Nick, do you want to cheat and go ahead?
I didn't look at the notes. I'm saying 8
because it's show number 8. I would guess at 3, Matt. I've always said that it was 3, and I might have to go back and redo my speeches if it's not 3.
No, I'm going to combine what you said. We're going to take your 8 and your 3, and I'm going to make 93 because that's what 8 and 3 make.
Hmm.
Right? So
He's an
there's
engineer. He's an
approximately
engineer by
93
trade.
different ways to change behavior. Now, what's interesting to me, the reason that I'm so in love with these concepts as a marketer is because this is kind of this proven, tested, what Kahneman did, work with the military, work with students and academics to actually test these behavior change techniques. And then a group of people got together and they took all of the paper that they've seen on behavior change and they put them together and they grouped them into, there's 14 experts grouped into 16 categories, right? And they're things such as goal setting, right? Setting goals, you've heard this, helps you change behavior. Writing it down, helping you change behavior. Now, on the other side, you have things like penalties. If you don't do it, this is what's going to happen. You have prizes. If you do it, this is what's going to happen. You have social support. Let me put it out there what I'm going to accomplish so the community can hold me accountable and I can feel accountable. You have emotional, right? You have habits. You have prompts, right? When I'm driving home, I think to myself, when I get to this light, I have to remember to turn left. That light becomes my prompt to remember to pick up the pizza, right? So you have prompts, you have sources, you have credible sources. An academic, right, carries more weight than somebody I just don't know I don't know their background, right? Something like that. So you're always thinking about what am I qualified to speak on? That's where this kind of thing can make sense. So there's 93 different ways to do that.
93.
93.
How'd they figure that out?
Lots of testing. But I'm going to go over 2 simple acronyms. Okay. The first one is called mind space. Okay. Mind space, MINDSPACE. Look it up. There's a great paper on it. There's also a great paper on the 93 academic behavior change techniques. Pick it up, read it. It's riveting. Okay. Mind space, however, think about M, messenger. We are influenced by who communicates to us, their authority, and our feelings for the messenger, right? I'm a big fan of Buddy. If he tells me something, I believe him. But Nick, he's been kind of unreliable in the past. If he tells me something, I question it. Who's the messenger? Makes sense, right?
Yep.
Incentives, right? Hold on, let me just change. There we go. Incentives, the type, size, timing, reference, perception, punishment, right? Estimation of experience. What are we getting? What are we not getting? What are we giving up? Opportunity cost. If I go out fishing, what chores am I not getting done at home? What are you giving up, right? So you have incentives. Then you have norms, social norms, friends, cohorts, positive and negative influence. So N is norms. D, defaults. What's the default option? This is big, and this is going to come back later, right? What is the default option that you're giving people? If you default to opt into a program, most people will.
Opt in?
Yes.
I wasn't sure if that was the prompt.
That was the prompt. Yes, right? S, saliency. We are influenced by what our attention is drawn to, what is novel, simple, easily accessible. Okay. Priming, P. This one is one of my favorites. What are you exposed to subconsciously that influences your later behavior? I've seen some fascinating studies on priming. Priming is an amazing thing. You can change people's outcome by what they are exposed to. Just simple things like behind me here, we have a wheel, right? And it has numbers and dollars, and you're thinking about money. Scientifically, it's been shown when you're thinking about money, then I ask you to estimate the cost of something, you may actually increase your estimate based on being primed to think about money. All right? Interesting, right? Are you being primed to think about health? Are you being primed emotionally to think about gorillas? All right? So if we think about something like the article we just talked about on Reddit, right? This is an organization that was already, well, a group, not an organization, I guess they were organized, that is already primed. You know, they weren't just trading stocks. If you read the stories, they were activists, right?
Mhm.
And to throw something like Save the Gorillas into an activist group, they're primed to help. They're looking to do good. They're not out there looking to be selfish, right? And so again, it can contribute to the success of something like that. So we just saw that, right? Then we have affect, so emotional associations, and commitment, costs of failure, right? How much are you going to commit? And we see that in a lot of different ways,
Yeah.
right? And the last is ego, self-image. How does this make me look? Good, bad? Is it consistent with what I believe about myself? Do I believe myself to be a good person? And is this consistent with something I believe? That's mind space. What are your thoughts?
Well, number one, I think it's a great acronym. I mean, I'd heard of Kahneman
Yep.
when I saw it on your list, and I Googled him, and then I read about him on Wikipedia. That was my exposure to Kahneman. I'd actually never heard of Kahneman before that. So all kidding aside, this is educational for me, but I like the acronym, and it gets me thinking how charities should use the Mindspace acronym to go, okay, like you said, how do we prime these people to open their wallets or make a donation or otherwise support it? How do we use people's ego to share it on social media? These are all areas that are motivating people, and then you have to get them to change their behavior, right?
Yep.
If you're not posting it on social media today, I can appeal to your ego to tweet out a link to our next fundraiser. So I think those are the kinds of things that are very easy to do if you understand people's motivation. And I think Mindspace goes into those motivational elements. What do you think, Nick?
I thought it was great. I actually did read Kahneman's book through Audible, thanks to a long commute. It is probably that thick if you didn't listen on Audible.
Great though, right?
But yeah, fantastic. Just very, I mean, to make it that thick, very in-depth and detailed. I thought it was a good acronym, and that's only 9 of 93, right? Do I got my characters right?
That's not even part of the 9. The 9 gets so much more specific. This is one take on, you know, a group's evidence behavior change and in marketing's techniques, and it's been, you know, tried in healthcare and some other areas.
Yeah, one of the things I thought real quick was on the priming is the anchoring effect of money. So if I tell you something is you know, $10,000, and then well, I have this for 5, anchoring the mind on a price, that always fascinates me.
And you might be able to anchor people. You might be able to anchor people by saying, you know, the average donation is $100.
Excellent, yeah.
Right. You can say you're at a fair, set up a little booth, fundraising, you know, and how much do I donate? Oh, whatever you want. You know, they say like, oh, whatever you want. You go like, give me a starting point. Then, well, the average person gives $5. Here's $5.
Yeah, I mean, right. So you could do that. You can also have a high, a low, and throw a medium in there. And you can aim for that medium because the high looks the medium look better, right? And you can actually increase.
Yeah, and nobody wants to be the person that goes below the lowest donation if they're like, well, the low is 5, but you wouldn't want to just do 5, right? You're right. It appeals to their ego, right? Like you said, you know, you have to think about people. This is a donation is an emotional thing.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting is, you know, using your powers for good, because when you start to think about these things, what you're really trying to do is frame, you know, your position, right? We've worked our way through strategy. We've worked our way through understanding ourselves, our mission, our vision. And what this is going to do is start to give us context, right? You know, we've talked a lot about different charities like the baseball charity a few weeks ago. Like, what's the right context? Well, they were baseball photos at a baseball, you know, Hall of Fame. And, you know, it's an interesting thing. And today we're talking about charitable giving and social media and you know, that kind of stuff in an area of activism. You know, it's contextually appropriate. So you start to think about this, and who did it come from? Where did it originate? From within, or was somebody trying to break into that to try and leverage that large group? Because we see that all the time too, right? You get a large Facebook group, and what's it say right at the top when you're joining? No ads, right? You know, no marketing, no outbound links. LinkedIn, same thing, right? But when you're a member of the group, when you're a trusted member, right? When you are somebody who is part of the team, you might become okay. You're trusted. You're somebody that's contributed. You're one of us. You're somebody that can speak on the topic that we are aligned with.
And you had 2 acronyms you wanted to share with us?
The other one's easier. Okay, this is Chip and Dan Heath. Big fan of them. Anybody know Made to Stick?
Yeah, now that book I read because it was
Right.
short and it used smaller words. I don't read like Nick, those big
I live-
giant. You
They use smaller words
you-
because the smaller word is success, right? Simple, unexpected, credible, concrete, emotional story. And I'll talk you right through that. Simple, right? Less is more, the root of the idea. Save the gorillas. Why? Boom, we're done, right? Unexpected. Did you expect to see Save the Gorillas today? Credible. We talked a lot about credibility. We talked a lot about what authority do you have to speak on this topic? Who are you that's introducing this information to me? Why would somebody come to me, and for what information can I offer? Right? So I'm a marketer, I'm a technologist, I'm a coder, right? We've been in this for 20 plus years, but nobody's coming to me to ask about plumbing. Right?
Right.
So because I'm not qualified to speak on that in your mind, even though, as we both know, we had to delay the show because I was under the sink sweating pipes when I broke off a faucet.
I do remember that. Yeah, we were supposed to be on the other night.
So that happened. Concrete, right? A powerful tool to paint a mental picture, right? A concrete story. You understand the solidity of it. Emotional, appeal to the emotions. Now, this is something that I actually thought fit really, really well with our article, right? Because it's something that we know since probably the late 80s, is that due to a psychological reaction called psychic numbing, you actually can process better Save One Gorilla. If you look at the charity that went viral in this case that we just discussed, it wasn't Save All the Gorillas. It wasn't, this is the scale of the problem, it's enormous. Because at some point, we all know, we can all look at, Nick, how many charities are in 501c3 lookup.org? Thousands, millions.
Millions.
Right? Right? Somebody is out there, and those are millions of charities helping how many more millions of people and animals and others that need help around the world. If you were to try and process all that as a human being, it would be overwhelming, right? So we have a reaction called psychic numbing, where we're not responding to all of the gorillas because I feel like I can't do that. That's too big for me, right? It's something that my dollars won't fix, but I can adopt a gorilla, right? One gorilla, I can see it, I can name it, it has a name, I can connect with it, and you can skip over that psychic numbing reaction. Again, it's just something that we as humans possess, and when we start to think about decision making, we start to understand how that happens, and that's an emotional connection. And then we have stories, right? When you tell a story, create that connection, and that's the success acronym: simple, unexpected, credible, concrete, emotional story.
I like story the best. That's my favorite part of it.
I like stories too.
Yeah. Well, I think, when you get an emotional story, something that's meaningful, it creates that imperative that you do want to help. But when it's just like, here's a giant number, aren't you shocked at this giant number? You, like you said, you just go numb. There's nothing you can do with that. So I think our charities would do well to really think about honing down, like, this is a person that we helped with your money, and more of this money will help us to help more people like this.
So I have 4 more topics, but I don't know that we have time for all of them tonight. So I'm going to poll the audience here. Okay, maybe some people can put some comments in the show or send an email if they want to hear one of the other ones. But I'm going to put out 4 topics for you both, and you let me know which 2 do you think were, 1 or 2 you think we can cover. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have loss aversion as in ownership and transactional. Okay, and I have a couple areas that we could discuss there. I have what's called the paradox of choice. Barry Schwartz, really interesting book if you get a chance, right? How do we choose? And what do we think about the choices we make? Number 3, and I know this is a favorite, knowledge and how that impacts our choices. So the curse of knowledge and Dunning-Kruger. And then the final one is group decision-making processes and influences. What do you think? We have group, we have knowledge, we have the paradox of the choice, and we have ownership.
You know, I like the group one.
You like the group one?
Yeah, I think it's so hard to get group consensus on things.
Yeah.
So I'd like to learn a little bit about more about group dynamics, Matt.
Okay. Nick, which
I
one do you
like
like?
the loss aversion because it's so powerful. The fear of losing is
Oh my.
More powerful than the will want to gain.
One of my favorites for sure, Nick. Okay, so we're going to start with group decision-making processes, and we're going to end on loss aversion. I think that's going to be a great place to end because there's a fascinating story that goes along with that one. Okay, are we ready?
Ready.
Group decision-making process. We're ready. Okay. So there's a couple of different ways that groups make choices, right? And it's important to think about them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover 4 different ways that groups make choices so that you can start to understand how do you influence the group decisions. I'm not going to get heavy into group dynamics, but it's an interesting topic that maybe we can cover later. So the first one, majority rules, right? The decision that most people support, a vote, a show of hands, is the direction we go. Now, in that case, 51% is enough, means 49% didn't get their way. So it's an interesting dynamic. A lot of times it's viewed as fair. Sometimes they push that up to you need a 65% majority or something like that, or an overwhelming majority in order for something to move. But it's an interesting way for a group dynamic that you would want to think about. How do people choose? So when we talk about a business that is looking to donate, how do they donate? Is it a person or a group? And if it's a group, how does the group decide? It may be a majority vote, right? You put it out there. Oftentimes we've seen in an organization we used to work for, they put out a holiday contest for donations, and people voted, right? As part of the voting, they determined where the funds were directed for the charities. Majority rules. We've all heard that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hierarchical, top down. There's a boss, there's a senior leader. Often ideas are gathered. Input is given. We all know the RACI chart, right? Responsible, accountable, consulted, informed, right? So it's lots of people, information is taken in, but ultimately one person makes the choice. And that's interesting from a marketing perspective because you have to decide, are you going straight off to the decision maker, or are you going to try and influence the informers? Right? Now, then you have proportional. A person or a group has a greater say in others because they have a stronger connection to it. Okay? So if you have, for instance, majority share, right? And we see this in social media, right? How do we evaluate who we want to talk about as a thought leader on social media?
Count their followers.
Right? They have a majority share. We believe they're a heavier influencer. And we're starting to talk about influence marketing, right? So it's a proportional to a decision that's being made. If you can get an influencer, you may be able to shift behavior. And then in the final way we talk about it is consensus. A decision is reached by the group as a whole, and everybody has to agree. You see a lot of this in healthcare, right? You're going to talk it through. Sometimes you see this in legal or government. You have to eventually talk it through till we all come to a consensus and we agree on a direction. Maybe not always the optimal direction, maybe not always the favorite. Oftentimes it's a give and take, but you have to be willing to work with the other in order to get stuff done, and you move ahead as a group. So there you have it, 4 dynamics for group decision making that you can start to look at who you're trying to influence. We talked about partnerships in earlier episodes, right? How do you make those partnerships happen? How do they make choices? How do they choose what's going to happen?
So how would the group decision making be contextualize for this, Matt? Are you talking more on the side of the organization, or are you talking more on the side of the contributors?
Contributors. In that case, I was talking about contributors, but you do have to understand your organization, right? There's three of us. We can easily do a majority rules with a vote, right? We can do a hierarchical, right? Nick's the boss. He decides what we talk about. We could do a proportional, right? Buddy, you're much more invested in this than I am. So your say has more weight, right? And then, or we could do a consensus where the three of us get together and discuss how to move forward. That's internal. That's for us. But if we're trying to say, do a B2B play, business to business, we're trying to work with an organization, create a partnership. Who decides whether that's going to happen? Is it a committee? If it's a large organization, so you want to do business with Bill and Melinda Gates, right? How does that happen? Is there one person? Is there multiple people? Like how do they decide where the money goes, how it's allocated, right? And if you can understand that, you can understand tactically in messaging how to approach it, right? Are we looking to influence a vote? Majority rules, right? In which case, it's a broad spectrum attempt to influence a vote. You really just need to win 51% in order to be effective.
So this could probably, I think you're also saying this is how an organization might decide how they spend their money. You know, what events they attend, what fundraisers they throw, what worthy beneficiaries of the money that they've raised, what worthy beneficiaries, and then there's a group dynamic. And as you said, you know, sometimes it goes up to the singular person, could be the president or the CEO.
Right.
It could be a committee that's been appointed to come up with a recommendation. And I think those dynamics are interesting. There's a lot of influence and a lot of currency trading, and I don't mean money currency. I mean political currency, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, even so far as we talk a lot about organizations as services, but a lot of times they have products. You see every time you buy a pair of socks get donated. Well, how do you get those socks in stores? Who do you have to talk to at the store, right? So now you have kind of this B2B marketing side. On top, you have two levels. You need to convince the store to carry your socks. That's your B2B marketing. And you have to convince the consumer to buy the socks once they're at the store. Right. B2C marketing. So in the B2B world, you may need to influence a majority. You may need to influence a boss. Who's the person, who's the buyer, or the group of buyers that you need to influence. So there's lots of areas, and it's important to contextualize it for your own organization, what you're trying to do, but you may be trying to do many things, right? If you're trying to influence a committee, let's talk about a town, right? I work on a soccer league, which is a charity, right? It's a 501c3, but they may need to work with the town to get lights on a field, or to get a field mowed or lined, or new goals, or to put in a playground or a swimming pool, right? How do you influence that? Because this is a committee, a town committee, that actually influences the budget for the town that can help the organization, right? So what do you need to do? Do you influence the committee members? Do you want to influence the voters for the committee members? Right? So you have to start to think about these group decision-making processes so that you can determine your strategy for how you want to go after the behavior change.
Wow. Good stuff.
Yeah, it is good stuff. It's very interesting. And Nick, you picked a good one, right? Loss aversion. Okay, like so here we go. Ownership and transactions. Okay. I have three ways that we're going to talk about ownership and transactions. We're going to start by talking about loss aversion, which is loosely defined as the tendency for people to prefer avoiding loss over the equivalent gain, as in you would rather not lose $1 more than you would rather gain $1. So think about it more like the equivalent to losing $1, the equivalent sadness on the happy side is $2. Right? I got to give you $2 for the equivalent, right? So that's loss aversion in its kind of loose aversion. So if you think about it, loss aversion is not the study of how to win. It's the theory of how not to lose. Okay. So some studies actually suggest that losses are felt twice as powerfully as equivalent gains. Okay. And the interesting story that I love is a fellow named Max Bazerman. He's a professional professor of negotiation over at Harvard Business School. Okay. And every year he conducts what's called the Bazerman auction. Okay. Where Max Bazerman auctions off, Professor Bazerman, a $20 bill. Seems simply enough, auctioning off a $20 bill, right? But there's two rules to the auction. The first rule is bids go in $1 increments, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? The second rule is both the first and second place bidder has to pay. Only the first person gets the $20 though. Interesting, right? You want to guess the winning bid, Max's record?
$100.
Nick?
25.
204.
For a $20 bill.
For a $20 bill, because people don't want to lose. So you get to $19. I say 19, Nick says 20. And I think to myself, if I could just get that $20 bill at $21, I'm going from losing 19 to losing 1. I say $21. I'm now paying $21 for a $20 bill. And Nick says, I'm about to lose $20, but if I bid 22, I'm only losing $2. I'm going to bid 22, 23, 24, 25, 30, 40. And you keep going like this because you don't want to lose $19. You lose 203. And by the way, Professor Basserman donates the money. There's your charity, Tanya.
There's your charity time. Well, I think the way you wrapped that in a story was really good, Matt. And I think, like everything else that we're talking about on the show, this is part of our learning journey. Mm-hmm. If you find what we've been talking about interesting, and I'm sure you will, and especially if you work in an organization, I encourage you to go back to our earlier episodes and explore. Really get into some of the topics. The news topics are timely. These teachings that Matt's been taking us through are very timely. Speaking of Matt, where can they find our podcast and how can they subscribe?
They should definitely look for the podcasts on the Apple or Google apps because it will be there. But if they want to get the audio directly, we have a wonderful page over at 501c3lookup.org. Just click on the 501 companion.
And Nick, speaking of 501c3 blah, 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 you'll have to say it again for me, Matt. Where can they find you, Nick? Where's the website?
Yep, I'll say it again.
Say it again for me because I never get it right, Nick.
501c3lookup.org. And
Goes right off the tongue.
Yeah. It's a mouthful.
Those words.
Oh, say it again, Nick.
501c3lookup.org.
And what do they find on that free website?
And on that website, we have a listing of the 2 million plus charities that the IRS has released information on over the last X number of years, 10 years. We've got about 8 years of IRS data in there right now.
That's amazing, Nick. And where can they find you personally if they want to follow your technical musings?
Yeah, Nick_Rufa at Twitter, and you can find me on Instagram, Nick Rufa.
I love it. Matt, where can they find you? I know you're a LinkedIn guy, but give them a little detail of where they can find you to continue the dialogue.
The best place to start is my website, MatthewBalow.com, BALOGH.com. From there, I link out to everything, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can find all the information you need to contact me there.
And everybody can find me everywhere at BuddyScalera.com, Buddy Scalera on Twitter, Buddy Scalera on Instagram. I hope you all enjoyed the 501 Companion podcast. Stick around. The best is yet to come, and keep giving.